Please stand. And let's face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing.
Good evening. Blessed be the name of our God, King of the universe, who has given us life and favor. We enter your gates with thanksgiving and enter your courts with praise. We thank thee, Father, for this opportunity to gather together, to meet and to work together to do good deeds by helping others. We pray that we may do your will so that you may help us to help others as one family under one name. We humbly ask that you bless this assembly and lead us and guide us in our effort to serve you and serve one another. We will listen and obey as we are joyous that this is a day that you have made. May you bless us and keep us. May we continue to receive your grace, and may you smile upon us and give us peace. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ana Cuervo, LULAC Director for LULAC Florida District 3. On behalf of LULAC Florida District 3 Council, I want to thank you for joining us this evening on a discussion which is key to all of us and the community we serve. The need of maintaining a bilingual and biliterate community. I am excited to see so many educators, students, parents, business partners, education activists, and community leaders. You are all our very special guests, and we appreciate that you have taken the time out of your busy schedules to participate in this community forum. This shows us your commitment to our children, our public schools, our communities, and the importance of bilingual education, which will be our focus topic this evening. First, I would like to thank and ask LULAC presidents, directors, council members, and forum planning committee to please stand up. Thanks to your hard work, this forum was made possible. And of course, to our esteemed panelists for your participation, and our moderator. Let's begin by recognizing if we have any elected officials, if you could please stand up. School board members. We have Raquel Regalado. We also have Dr. Perez, Dr. Feldman. Do we have anyone else? And any staff members, because sometimes they have other engagements and they send staff. Do we have any staff that we need to recognize? Okay, district personnel. We would like to recognize at this time any district personnel from Miami-Dade Public Schools. If you could please stand up. Ms. Llanos, Ms. Abadul. Thank you. UTD, if we have any officers. We have Tom Gammon, and I know I saw some executive board members. Thank you. And the parents that represent PTA, thank you so much for taking time for coming to our event. If I missed anyone, please let me know so that your organization can be recognized. Thank you. I'm going to ask Libby Perez, LULAC Florida Deputy District 3 Director and President of LULAC Council 7232, up to the podium to go over our forum guidelines and introduce our moderator, Libby Perez.
Good evening. Put this a little higher. Good evening, and thank you for joining the LULAC family in this community forum. I want to review some guidelines so that you know what to expect this evening and to ensure the success of the panel discussion. First, kindly please turn down the ringer on your cell phones so that everyone can hear the panelists. We really appreciate it. Panelists will have 1 minute for their opening remarks and a maximum of 5 minutes for their response to the questions specifically directed to them. If time allows, additional questions will be posed that any panelist can answer if they wish within 2 minutes. Kindly refrain from shouting any comments while the panelists are speaking. We want to stress that the comments expressed by the panelists are not necessarily those shared by LULAC Florida councils. We want to remind forum participants that all viewpoints are welcomed, but we insist that all speakers be treated with respect and courtesy. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator. She is a product of bilingual public education right here in South Florida. She is a 4-time Emmy Award-winning news reporter for Telemundo 51. Occasionally, she also reports for sister station NBC6 and is the proud mother of 2 children that are also growing up bilingual and bicultural. Help me welcome Miss Ana Cuervo.
Good evening, everyone. It is a true honor for me to be here this evening. The high-quality education I received in Coraway Elementary, now Coraway K-8, was instrumental in making my dream of becoming a news reporter in this market come true. And besides that, every day I see professionals that are more successful because they are bilingual. Politicians, doctors, investigators, police officers, lawyers, community activists. I believe that not giving our children this opportunity is really a disservice. And on the contrary, expanding bilingual education would only open more doors. As a reporter, I'm supposed to be objective, but as you can see, I'm not objective in this topic. So, now I will introduce the panelists, and they will each have a minute to give us their perspective on the need for maintaining a bilingual and biliterate community. Our first panelist is Dr. Rosa Castro-Feinberg. Thank you so much.
I think I can project to this room.
Before you do, I will add that you're an advocate for children, immigrants, and minority language learners in the United States, and the first Hispanic woman elected countywide to the Miami-Dade County Public School Board.
And obviously, I still haven't learned all the moves. Thank you all for being here. You're the reason that this panel has convened, so that we can share impressions about what's happening with our students, with our programs, with our school system in relation to bilingual education and the opportunities for becoming biliterate. I will be very brief. That slideshow that we saw just a minute ago gave you many reasons why bilingualism and biliteracy is important. You're here because you already know the reasons: economic, personal, social, familial, academic, cognitive, all of the good reasons. And we're all here because we share the same goal. We want to improve continually the programs of bilingual education offered to our children. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Castro-Feinberg. And now we have Annette Tadeo Goldstein, business entrepreneur and a candidate for 2016 U.S. Congress, District 26. In 1995, she founded Language Speak, a language services company that offers translations in over 240 languages and has been named one of the top 100 small businesses in Florida and one of the top 500 small businesses in the United States.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I am honored to be here, and obviously I'm very much for bilingual education or multilingual education. I've built a business on it, and Some people may not know that I actually came to the United States when I was 17 and I spoke very little English. And it was that experience, going to school and, going through the hardships of learning the language, that I realized that there was a tremendous advantage once I improved my English, and still trying to improve it. But it's just amazing to me that, I have made a tremendous amount of money, let's be honest, off of the fact that people can't communicate. And what makes this the gateway to the Americas is the fact that we have so many people able to communicate in so many languages. And I have a daughter in public school, and I want to make sure that she has a bright future where she can communicate in whatever language she wants to learn. She's already bilingual English-Spanish, but I will tell you, her Spanish is not where it should be, although we speak it at home, and she learns it at school. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm here to make sure that we can move in that direction and continue to improve the access to language education.
Thank you very much. Now we have Mercedes Toral, retired from Miami-Dade County Public Schools as the Deputy Superintendent of Schools and Chief Education Officer. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Today, as I was getting ready to leave my house, I've been retired for 10 years. My husband said, "And what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to this forum on bilingual education." He said, "Boy, you're probably going to give them everything you have been thinking of for the last 10 years. Let me tell you, bilingualism is important not just to the individual person, to the individual students, but it's very, very important to this community. We are the gates to the America, and we are sitting here with a false sense of bilingualism. We think our kids speak Spanish. Well, maybe they speak kitchen Spanish or social Spanish, but if they're going to compete in the workforce, they need to be able to read, write, draft business letters in Spanish. Otherwise, we better hope we continue with a lot of immigration and input from Latin American countries where they have the individuals who have been trained in the language. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. So it's a survival skill. Basically, learning Spanish or any other language is a survival skill. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Now let's welcome Raquel Regalado, Miami-Dade County Public Schools District 6 school board member and 2016 candidate for mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Thank you.
Tengo una gana de hablar en español. We're not going to be able to talk in Spanish, right? We're going to have to do English the entire time.
English plus one.
Yeah, I know. I want to speak in Spanish. My name is Raquel Regalado, and I was born in Miami-Dade County in 1974. And I mention that because I grew up in a county that was not as diverse as it is today, in a family that decided early on that they were not going to teach us English. So a lot of people are surprised to learn that I am an English learner. I actually walked into first grade not knowing a word of English. My mother ripped off the back of her Dunhill box, wrote the word restroom, and gave it to me and told me to give that to the teacher should I need to go to the bathroom. And I was mortified because I did not know the language. And I remember crying the first time I saw an interview about English only on TV because, as Celia Cruz used to say, my English wasn't so pretty. And the idea of not being able to speak Spanish was horrifying to me. And I was heartbroken when people started putting bumper stickers on their cars that said, when the last American leaves Miami, take the flag. I remember that Miami. So when other panelists talk about what exactly is at stake here, I want you to remember that, because we've sort of taken diversity for granted because it's become so popular. And one of the things that I want to remind you is regarding the importance of bilingualism and biliterate. I'm so glad that we're making the distinction between being bilingual and being biliterate. I hope that we get to drill down on that for everyone. You know, as a child, I did not understand why my parents wouldn't teach me English, and it was a serious issue of contention in our house. In fact, for every word that I said in English in my house, I had to copy a page from La Real Academia, Edicional Real Academia Española, which for those of you who know how big that book is, you can understand. It really was a serious thing in my house. To speak English was a problem. And actually, my Spanish teacher is in this room somewhere, so Ingrid Robledo, wherever you are, I love you. She sent me a text a few minutes ago. But I had amazing Spanish teachers, and I had a family that really made it a priority. And I leave you with this point because I think it's so important and something that will resonate as we have this conversation about the importance of bilingual education. When I asked my mother many years later why she didn't teach me English and why she made it so difficult for me to learn English and why I had to be bullied by other children because I spoke with an accent, I had no idea, but it seems I do. She said that the beautiful thing about this country is that you got to decide what part of your culture you kept and what part of your culture you left behind. And she did not want me to be carne con puerco, you know, arroz con frijoles negro Cuban. She wanted me to be a Cuban who had an appreciation for language, for literature. So when I walked into my first grade class, when I was 6 years old, I could read and write in Spanish. And that's what they had focused on because they wanted to ensure that I kept my bilingual and biliterate education alive and well. And it has served me tremendously when we talk about the impact that it's had on our careers. As a young attorney, I was the only biliterate one in the firm. As a media personality, I've been able to do Spanish radio every day and TV. And this is actually the most English I've spoken in a very long time.
Now we welcome Tony Miranda, a product of public bilingual education, recognized expert in the field of dual language education, and a retired supervisor from Miami-Dade Public Schools Division of Bilingual Education. Welcome.
And if you think I'm sitting in two places at the same time, that's my twin sister over there. We have different hair colors. I want to start by saying, in the words of Paulo Coelho, and I have taken the liberty to translate him, this. It says, there is a language in the world that we all understand. It is the language of enthusiasm, of things done with love and willpower, seeking that which is desired or that one believes in. This quote describes how I am linked to this topic of bilingual education. I am a product of dual language education in my country of birth, Cuba. When I came to the USA, I simply walked into a public school and continued my education in a language that was already familiar to me. I have spent my entire professional career in the field of bilingual and dual language education. First as a teacher, lead teacher at Coral Way, and then as in the district as a supervisor in the Division of Bilingual and Education and World Languages. I deeply believe in the right of every child to acquire a second language and to develop their heritage language, which is a vital part of their identity. Nothing else makes sense in this 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'll introduce to you Dr. Shirley B. Johnson, prominent civil rights leader, State Education Committee Chair, Florida Conference, NAACP, United Teachers of Dade Interim President, 2003-2004. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I would like for the NAACP young adults who are here to just wave your hands so that everybody can know that you are a part. Because of my civil rights days, and because of what I learned from my father and my mom, that every person in this nation, every person I saw, every person that I said something to, was an individual with not in anything else but an individual that was worth being someone. In my civil rights days, I learned that everybody was somebody, and anybody can be somebody. No one did we ever put down. So my first job in Miami-Dade County Public Schools was with a bilingual school. I was a girl from Jackson, Mississippi. And then I get to see these beautiful children coming in, and I love them so much. And it was very important to me at 6th grade, I was teaching 6th grade, that every child in that school and every child I had was going to be at the top of the scale. So most of those children were Hispanic. They were just coming in. I opened up Miami Gardens Elementary, a brand new school. So we had 2 teachers. One I had that taught all of the English, and the other one taught the Spanish. And I can tell you that before long, I watched all of the children as they grew. But I also saw some things that I knew that I had to do as a teacher so that we could communicate effectively. It was not very long before I took a course and learned the culture. If you know the culture and can receive the culture of anyone, you can communicate effectively, you can know who they are, and you can love them. So from that day forward, I was in love and found out so many things because the children told me everything. So I learned that there were so many things that we have in common. And of course, one of the experiences that I had as a child was to go to the March on Washington in 1963, and I had an opportunity to see and hear Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. At that time, I settled in my mind that for the rest of my life, his dream became my mission. And so bilingual education has no color for me. When I look at bilingual education, you know there is no color. Many, 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 many kids can say anything in a lot of language. And you have to look around because the colors are black and white, Protestant, Jews, Gentile, everything. And so when you look at that and you know, I found out by the end of the 3 school years at Miami Gardens that the students who had both languages, both the English and the Spanish, they outscored everybody in the whole entire school. Bilingual education makes a difference. I believe that every child should have the opportunity to get as many languages and speak as many as they possibly can, because it's only going to unite the country, unite the world, and all of us will be better because of it.
Thank you very much. And now, Teresita González Angulo, experienced employment counselor and radio show host for Actualidad 1020.
Well, after her presentation, I don't think anybody can beat that one, but I'm very honored to be here, and I'm very interested in trying to help as much as possible, whatever we can do to improve the situation we're facing nowadays for our children. Basically, the only thing I can tell you, I do work with people with disability. I work towards their rehabilitation and go back into the workforce. And it is amazing that those people who are not bilingual have little chances of having employment nowadays. It's not only a matter of keeping your background or your, I cannot think of a word in any language, your culture, right. But basically, it's a matter of money also. You have to be realistic about it. You have to be bilingual, and not only bilingual, but that's right. And also, it's not only Spanish anymore. I do work for an agency that has an office in Miami Beach and the other one in North Miami, and I do serve Hispanics as well as Haitians. And they are very pleased when in the middle of our interviews or counseling session, they get stuck in certain ways to explain their problems, and I go ahead and tell them in French, go ahead and tell me. And even though it's not the same as Creole, but the interaction immediately changes there. So language is something that is so vital for us to be able to not only communicate, but to be able to express our empathy towards their problems. In my case, as a supported employment counselor, that I consider this a main vital issue for us to be fighting and to do whatever is necessary to continue having a bilingual county. Or not only bilingual, but trilingual and whatever. Multilingual is more, because they are the people from Brazil that are here. So this is the only country where speaking different languages is not a common thing. When you're in Europe, the more the merrier. So I think we should follow those steps. Thank you.
I want to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspective. Now we're going to go into the question period. I will kindly ask you to please answer the specific question, to stay on topic, and to please do it in less than 5 minutes each so we can discuss as much as possible and get into different topics and questions. The first question is for Dr. Rosa Castro-Feinberg. Research emphasizes the importance of multilingual education in today's world. Under the Florida Constitution, students are guaranteed equity and equal access to a quality education. What is your position on access to multilingual education for all students?
Funny you should ask. And for this, I have to stand up because I have to see all of you. My position, yes, it's good for everyone to have access to opportunities to become bilingual and biliterate. That's the direct answer to the question. But there's more. I believe we have a legal responsibility as well as a moral responsibility to provide these opportunities. And we don't have to go as far as Tallahassee in order to find the legal basis for that. There are two board policies that are very important. One is 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. Now, this is the school system's policy, and it says, among other things, student access, review current and proposed programs, verify that all students have equal access thereto and are not segregated on the basis of, and then the long list of all the protected classifications. And there also is a section on district support, and that section is, reminds the staff to verify that similar aspects of the district's program receive similar support as to staff size and compensation, purchases, maintenance of facilities, and so on. That's the board rule on non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. And that is saying the same thing I'm saying. Every child ought to have a chance to be bilingual and to become biliterate. There's another board item 2226, Bilingual Education, Foreign Languages, which says all the right things, all the things I just said, which are the right things, of course. They're worth pursuing. And the fact of the matter is that the times that Raquel talked about, the dark days, the 70s, the 80s, you remember that in the 80s, not only was there English only nationally, but our own county commission passed an English only resolution. An English only resolution that had ramifications even for the health and continued existence of patients in hospitals and so on. And in the 80s, between the late 70s and the early 80s, the dark days were so bad that every summer it rained. Every summer there was a budget hearing. Every summer they tried to cut one or another part of the bilingual program in order to solve the budget crisis. And it was during one of those days that I decided to position myself to gain appointment to the school board. So when I say yes, I believe that every child is entitled to these opportunities, I really mean it. I spent 10 years on the board, and that was the main reason that I was on the board and that I stayed on the board. Now, I tried to prepare for this by going through back minutes. Who's timing me?
You have about 3 minutes left.
Oh, great, great. I can do wonderful things in 3 minutes. I reviewed board minutes, I reviewed evaluation reports, I reviewed some notes that I had taken while I was on the board, some publications that I produced shortly after I was on the board. And this is what I discovered. This is the shorthand history lesson. That problems of implementation in bilingual and foreign language education that were first reported many years ago still plague us. They have not been resolved. For example, issues of teacher preparation, recruitment, career development, and assignment. Continuation of biliteracy instruction at middle school levels. We've been worrying about that since the 80s. Resistance to program implementation from principals. The most recent report on that I saw was in 2005, but I don't think things have changed too much. And the lack of home language materials. And that has been a problem reported as far back as 1987 and again in 2007. And I saw in the paper just the other day that we're going to get some new materials, and I appreciate that. I just wonder if they're in the home languages or not. Now, my conclusion is that if these roadblocks are not taken care of, if the problems are not solved, then it doesn't matter what program we have, we are not going to get the maximum return on investment for the funds necessary to support any of our bilingual and biliterate programs. We've got to take care of the roadblock at the middle school level. We have to figure out how to get really qualified staff in place. We have to orient, replace our principals as needed so that they don't become obstacles to program development. And we need to have the right kinds of instructional materials. Now, I further conclude, and this goes into the realm of speculation, that what we have here with the issue of the phasing out of Spanish S and Spanish SL and the expansion of EFL, English Extended Foreign Language Programs, is both a question of goal displacement and of everybody doing what they're supposed to do, and it isn't working. Goal displacement. The old board, the pre-1996, and the new boards have all said, staff, make more opportunities available for students to become bilingual and biliterate. Well, what's staff supposed to do? They're supposed to make more opportunities available. And the way they thought they should do that is by expanding the extended foreign language program. Except in order to expand it, they had to keep making adjustments so that the most current iteration of that program, the one described in the 2015-16 question and answer document on extended foreign language, bears so little resemblance to the origins of that program, Coral Way, think of Coral Way as the origin, that it hardly deserves to be called extended foreign language. It doesn't fit the pattern for heritage language, for immersion, for foreign language in the elementary school. It is neither fish nor fowl nor good red meat. It stands all by itself. Why? Because staff had to keep making changes to the program in order to shoehorn it into the possibilities created by limited staff and limited principal acceptance. It's like trying to put a size 8 foot in a size 5 shoe. The only way you can do it is painfully. And that's where I believe we are. Staff doing what they're supposed to do, expanding programs, but not realizing that we have more EFL programs in name only, not really what the board has asked you to do. And board saying repeatedly, expand those opportunities and not being aware of the ramifications of that directive, which right now appear to be elimination of the Spanish S, Spanish SL program and its replacement with a program that serves only a few students instead of a program that serves all the elementary school students. That's where I think we are, that's what I think our problem is, and that's what I hope we can solve together.
Thank you very much. Next question for Annette Tadeo Goldstein. As an aspiring member of Congress and an entrepreneur, how would you qualify the importance of language skills for our local community and for our nation at large?
All right, well, it's interesting. Most politicians always talk about jobs. Jobs, 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 jobs. And as a matter of fact, in Florida, we talked a lot in this last election where I was a part of it about jobs, jobs, right? But the issue is that you have to have kids that come out of school prepared for those jobs. And as a community, certainly in Miami-Dade, we're trying to attract and say we're the gateway to the Americas, but we really need to make sure that we actually invest in those kids to continue to be the gateway of the Americas. If you're not truly bilingual, and by that we've discussed really being able to read and write in the language and do business in the language, then we are not going to attract the kind of businesses that we've been trying to attract. And I've been on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce when we did the English +1, campaign with Rosa Sugrañez. And I remember how proud I was that we as a business community stood up and talked about the importance of this. I think it's time for us, not just politicians or Washington or Tallahassee, to look at the importance of this, but to also involve the business community. Because the business community knows that we need to have a qualified workforce. And right now, our kids are not getting that. I started saying about, my daughter is bilingual. I only spoke Spanish to her the entire time before she went to school. Now you can't get her to speak Spanish, right? It's like a constant fight. Háblame en español, háblame en español. I feel like so many parents I heard throughout, the years. I've become that mom. Háblame en español. But the other day I cringed and I realized how important this is. Although I speak to her in Spanish, she reads books in Spanish. She did a Mother's Day card in Spanish. And it was beautiful, beautifully written, pero un horror de ortografía. So I was like, oh my God. So she can speak it, but she can't write it. So we have work to do. And I use my daughter as a perfect example. But really, we need to go back to doing a campaign again, uniting, because I see many people, parents, former teachers, I see a lot of the community people here. We need to involve again back in the day when we did the English +1, again, uniting the business community as well, because we business owners understand how important it is that we have a workforce that is prepared for those jobs. And she's right, it's really hard to get a job if you don't speak another language and write it as well. And the culture and the beauty of Miami-Dade is that we are actually bridging the divide that most of the rest of America is still going through a lot of pains. We all have taught the rest of America how wonderful we can be when we all become that melting pot. But if we don't continue to harness on what we've built in Miami-Dade, we're going to lose it. So we need to work on that.
Thank you very much. I'm really resisting not to show off my 8-year-old's Spanish Mother's Day card as a student at Coraway. But I won't do that because that wouldn't be nice. Mercedes Toral, your question is, because of your long history in bilingual education as Chief Education Officer, can you briefly recount the history of language programs in Miami-Dade County Public Schools?
Well, I was also the Chief Administrator for the Division of Bilingual Education for about, I would say, about 10 years. My friend Shirley here was in many of the task force we had back then to deal with the whole issue of bilingualism. Well, very quickly, we started the programs in the early 1960s with Coraway Elementary. It was started by Ralph Robinette and Mr. Paul Bell. And I think the old-timers that are here, Carmen and Aide and Josefina Sanchez Pando, who were teachers in the program at that time, would remember them. And they were ahead of their times, let's put it that way. So we began with the establishment of Coraway Elementary as a bilingual school. It began with a 50-50 program, 50% of the time in English, 50% of the time in Spanish. Well, as it turned out, that wasn't really doable. So we ended up with 60% in English and 40% in Spanish. Coraway has been very successful. It has been visited by every international delegation that has come to this community, from the Japanese to the Russians to the South Africans, who wanted to know how Miami-Dade County Public Schools did it. A couple of years after establishing Coraway, or even earlier than that, the Spanish S program was established in other schools where you had language proficient kids, like Spanish proficient kids. And the rationale was that why wait until they forgot the language to try to teach them the language when they got to high school or to the university? That was not very feasible or very economical. So the Spanish S program was started in all the schools where they had qualified kids, kids who spoke the language. Well, a couple of years later, dealing with the issue of equal access and equal opportunities, the district started the Spanish FL program, or SL program, for the non-Spanish speaking kids to learn Spanish as a second language, or as a foreign language. So that was the beginning of the language programs, besides the English for speakers of other language, for the kids who didn't speak English, and so on. Going to what we did from the early 60s to the later years in the 80s, like Rosa Castro said, the 80s were very difficult years. I mean, we were always on the defensive. If the district needed money for anything, cut the bilingual programs. So it took us all the way to the 1990s, where the district administration said, let's do something different. Coraway is very successful, and we had other BISO schools. Why don't we try to replicate that? But doing a complete school, turning a school overnight into a bilingual school wasn't easy. It was not easy because you had a few parents who would rather just keep the foreign language programs that we had in the elementary school, not the whole day, not the 40% of the time. So we thought, why don't we do the school within the school concept? And that's how the extended foreign language was born. We started with 6 schools. We had 6 regions. We wanted 1 school in each region so that we could test and research and study the program to see if it worked. We ended up with 6 in 5 regions. In one of the regions, we couldn't find a taker. We didn't want to impose the program. We wanted the principal and the faculty to choose to implement this extended foreign language program. From the beginning, we knew one of the obstacles was going to be to ensure that we had qualified teachers, linguistically qualified teachers to teach the kids. A lot of our young people, they speak Spanish that some people call it kitchen Spanish, or the people call it family Spanish, or the people call it social Spanish. But we knew that our biggest challenge was to have teachers who spoke the language, who could read and write the language. Believe me, I have seen some spelling on those chalkboards. Okay? That's where she got it. Okay. So we started with 6 schools, and that served as our pilot schools. In 1995, the Chamber of Commerce, One Community, One Goal initiative, came to the school board and said, we can't do our job because you're not doing your job. You're not producing students who are really biliterate. We're having to import our executives. The high-paying jobs are not going to people in this community. We're having to bring people from overseas because your graduates cannot write a business letter, cannot conduct a business meeting in a language other than English. So with a push from the Chamber of Commerce, the staff and the board approved a plan for the 21st century, which basically what it did was trying to expand the extended foreign language to as many schools as were interested, 1. 2, had the qualified classroom teacher to do it. We knew we couldn't expand just the number of minutes in Spanish to have a Spanish S or Spanish SL, because there was no time in the elementary day to expand. If you've ever been involved in doing an elementary schedule, that the computers couldn't do it. Humans had to sit down and try to do it. So we knew that the only way to go was replicating the extended foreign language program in schools that had interested parents, in schools that had qualified teachers. We knew we needed support staff to train those teachers, because not only did they needed to be literate in Spanish or in French or in Creole, we tried to do it in several languages. As a matter of fact, we had it in French and we had it in Russian.
Ms. Doral, I'm going to interrupt only because there are a few more questions about the program. So a lot of these topics there'll be other chances to continue to discuss it.
And then that was the beginning of the extended foreign language program, that it was done county-wide. We have the magnets, the language magnets. They cannot be replicated county-wide because they're expensive programs. You can have one here and one there, but you couldn't have 100 of them. We looked at the BISO schools. You couldn't replicate whole BISO school because of the staff issues, and also because you have to give parents choices. Not all parents want their kids in a very intensive language experience, so you needed to have the regular Spanish programs. So there are multiple studies, the Sant study that documented very clearly that this community had a false sense of bilingualism. And that furthermore, we needed, if we wanted to survive financially as the gateway of America, to have a community who spoke more than just English.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next question. For Raquel Regalado, school board member. Board members have frequently asked for expansion of opportunities for students to become bilingual and biliterate. Since you have been a school board member, have you received a status report on the implementation of bilingual programs? If so, can you share when and what the report indicated? If not, can you state why?
Well, I'll answer that question, and then I'm going to respond to some of the things that were said, because it's, yeah, but no, but
We're trying to stick to the question.
no, I understand, but a few things have come up that I think are important to clarify, and I'll keep it under the 5 minutes. In my district, I have the majority of dual immersion programs, and I think it's important that everyone understands what that means, because a dual immersion program, and we talked about it a little bit, it's a magnet where parents apply. And I wrote an article a few years ago when I first was elected to the school board that I was criticized for in El Nuevo Herald, talking about who was signing up for these magnets. Because if you look at who's signing up for these magnet programs, which are highly competitive and, like you said, highly expensive for the district, it is a lot of Anglos who do not know Spanish, who understand the value of being bilingual and put their children in it, and a lot of Europeans and Latin Americans who have brought English learners to this country and put those English learners in those schools. In the article, I emphasized on how my generation, the first generation Cuban-Americans, were not going to those schools, were not interested in immersion programs because it was too difficult. And I'll tell you my first experience with that at the school board. I got a call from a dear friend of mine, we grew up together, complaining about a bilingual immersion program. His son was in kindergarten, and he said, Raquel, you people are driving my poor kid crazy. He has all this homework in this bilingual program. Everybody said it was so fantastic, and I helped him with his homework, and the teacher said that it was wrong, but a farm is a finca, and everybody knows that. And I said, dude, it's not, it's a granja. And that, you know, I mean, what are you talking about? And we got into this whole conversation about kitchen Spanish, right? And the Spanish that'll get you a plate of food at Versailles, and really what people need to know. And if my generation has the ability to communicate, to be bilingual and biliterate. And unfortunately, the answer is no. I am a rarity in my generation. I did not sit in a Spanish class until I was in high school. And throughout my elementary years, those programs did not exist. And I was sent to the library every year to read El Mío Cid. Literally every year. Then it switched to Don Quixote, but the point is that they only had 2 books to give me to read. And it was really sad. But the reality is that there's a few things I would mention that I think it's important. There are parents that do not want the headache of bilingual education. Please understand that we get a lot of pushback. There are people in our community who feel that they are being forced to be bilingual and that they should not have to be bilingual. And we were, Rosa Castro-Feinberg was talking about the 80s, the 70s and the 80s. There are still people in this community who get upset at me when I talk about bilingualism because they think that we should learn English and that they should not have to know Spanish in order to get a job. So as a community, we have to deal with that. As a community, we have to be honest about our limitations. As a community, many of our elected officials are not bilingual or biliterate. I mean, and that's a reality, so how can they make it an agenda? You talk about one community, one goal, that was a long time ago. One community, one goal doesn't talk about those things. Now, what have I done? I have been a champion of bilingual education, as has been Marta Perez and a lot of members of the school board. It's a very expensive program. It's very difficult difficult to teach Spanish, and I'm happy to answer questions about the expansion. You know, we felt that more time would make for better education. We have found that that was not the case, that more time did not give us a better education. We have parents that want Spanish as an option, but the minute the Spanish gets even remotely difficult, they push back on us. And that's something that we have to be honest about, because as school board members, we have to deal with those complaints. And my generation that are now teachers, that are in their 40s, 30s and 40s, do not speak Spanish, and they check Spanish on the box. And we talked at our board meeting last month about this for an extended period of time. And one of the things I talked about are some of the changes that I think we have to make, and I hope that we'll talk about that here, and I know that you're all very well-versed in some of them. We have to make a distinguish between English learners and non-English learners. Just because a child walks into a school and they ask you the question, what was their first language, and the response is Spanish, does not mean that that child knows Spanish. Stop checking that box. It's a problem. And the same way, we have teachers that apply and they say that they know how to speak Spanish, and you speak to them for 5 minutes and you realize that they don't, They know some Spanish, but they are not equipped to teach Spanish. So these are all things that we have to deal with. And finally, to Ana Tadeo's point about the workforce, our community is not honest about our workforce. We are not honest about the services that we are outsourcing. We are not honest about the people that businesses have to bring in to do translations and to provide services that our residents cannot provide.
Ms. Regalado, could I ask you to take a minute to answer the question about the status report? Is there a status report about...
On all bilingual education? Well, at our last committee meeting, we actually had a full-blown status report on this particular issue. I personally received one on my schools, as we all do, and since I have the bulk of the immersion programs, I can tell you about that. Now, as for, the EFL, we had a presentation at our last committee meeting where we talked about, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at the school board meeting tomorrow, where we talked about what happened in the past and the changes that we want to make. And a lot of it answers some of these issues that we have been talking about for a while. And the district has been very honest in that when we started this, we thought that more time was going to give children a better education. But it's true what Rosa said. I mean, we're running up against the same stumbling blocks that have occurred, that have existed for a long time. But I would differ on you on one point. I do think that Tallahassee has something to offer. Tallahassee definitely has more funding to offer. And we are in a state that has to embrace bilingual education. We don't have that support. We pay for our bilingual programs out of the tax base of our local taxpayers. This is not something that we receive support from Tallahassee. The AP Spanish class is the same as it was 25 years ago when I went to Coral Gables Senior High. Nothing has changed. Our state talks about jobs, 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 but it does not talk about the importance of bilingual education in order to have those jobs. And I'll leave you with this last thought. In China and in Taiwan, their educational systems at the national level have decided that their students have to study Spanish, English, and Mandarin because of the numbers, because of how many people in the world speak those three languages. Now, I wouldn't agree with the conclusions that they said that French and Italian were dead, but that said, they were being very pragmatic, to the point of pragmatism and what the economy needs. They're very pragmatic. If you speak those three languages, you can communicate with more than 90% of the planet.
Speaking of percentages, does the status report, as a reporter, I like to get to the facts, does the status report say how many students are getting a bilingual education or getting at least exposure to a foreign language on a constant basis? Does the status report say how many children are going to leave our schools bilingual?
Well, I mean, it has numbers. Again, there's different programs. And that's what I'm telling you. You have to sort of parcel it out. English learners, in my book, should not count. English learners are bilingual by nature of being English learners. Okay? The state forces you to teach them English, and they already have some level of Spanish. So you have to look at that population because some of those children that come later already know how to read and write. So can you say that Miami-Dade County Public Schools taught them Spanish? I would say no. Miami-Dade County Public Schools taught them English. Okay? So that's number one. You have to look at that universe and see what's going on there. Then you go into the immersion programs. I can tell you as a school board member that the children who graduate from the immersion program are completely bilingual and biliterate. I opened ISPA, which was the high school that also now provides language education all the way to high school. those children, can give me a run for my money, right, on bilingual and biliterate education. But that's a very small majority. Now, the rest of the universe that takes Spanish, as an elective, we will say, because that's the easiest way to sort of explain it to people, it depends on the child. It depends on the child. It depends on the instruction that child happened to get. It depends, on how engaged the parents are. And that's part of the problem here. But I will caution you regarding this, that I think the first step, and Annette, it's right that we have to have a conversation on a broader scale. The parents don't think it's valuable, and our community hasn't said that it's necessary. And I think, one thing that we have to be honest about is there is this myth that we are all bilingual. And it's not true. And whenever you start drilling down and talking to people about what it means to be truly bilingual, then there's criticism because now you're trying to separate people. And that's not true. You're just being honest about their ability. If we were talking about math, we could say this person understands algebra and this one doesn't. So, when you look
Let's move on. There'll be questions at the end.
Right, but I'm just saying, when you look at the numbers, it's not that simple. But I do agree that we need to make it a priority and that we need to receive funding so that we can truly educate biliterate children.
For Tony Miranda, can you explain the original purpose of the Extended Foreign Language Program, and how does the current implementation of the Extended Foreign Language Program differ from the original plan?
I want to piggyback on what Mercedes said. The original pilot programs, the Extended Foreign Language did not come into existence in 1997. They came into existence in 1992 with 6 pilot schools that were based on the models of the Coral Ways of this world, and there were 60-40 models, 60% in English, 40% in Spanish or another language, and then the Spanish language arts were taught, or the language arts in the language other than English, and content, social studies or science or some math or computer skills in the target language. 6 schools which were very successful. And as Mercedes mentioned, and I want to emphasize this, there was an entire public relations and educational campaign to our parents through the Chamber of Commerce, English +1 campaign. They came to the school board. They told us they needed a bilingual workforce, right? And the board also jumped into this campaign. It is the role and the duty of the school board and the district to educate parents. We just can't simply say, well, the parents are not interested. If it's important in the models of education in the 21st century, then we as educational leaders have to educate the public and the community on that need. So that's how I think the Extended Foreign Language was born, right? In 1997, and I was asked to come from Coral Way, and together with Lourdes Rovira and Ralph Robinette, we wrote the plan in 1997, which was called Plan for Developing Bilingual Programs for the 21st Century, a plan that was presented and approved by the board. Actually, it had been requested by the board. The following year, 21st Elementaries started the program, and from there on, they have grown to this very date.
And how does the current implementation differ from that original plan?
That's another point. I have to explain first what the plan was, okay? First, the intent was to provide an option for a successful language program modeled after the bilingual school organization. The basic thrust of the plan was to offer each region, feeder pattern, and/or elementary and middle and high school an opportunity to design and submit a 4-year plan for developing increased bilingual biliterate proficiency in English and at least one other language. The importance and coherence of a K-12 continuum was emphasized, as well as existence in every region. In other words, this was a district-wide plan based on cooperative planning and common vision. It was just not an elementary plan. It was a plan that sought continuum of studies. We all knew that the three rules for a successful acquisition of a second language is start early, the earlier the better, apply the language, use the language to learn, and a continuum of studies. We all also know that it takes at least 5 to 7 years to acquire an academic language in a second language. So it requires a continuum, just not elementary, but a follow-up in middle schools and in high schools. And this original plan contemplated that. It's important to note that the long-term projection would be essentially cost neutral. And I would like to emphasize this. Based on BISO programs, where the classroom teacher does the instruction, the EFL program is cost neutral. It does not cost the district a great deal, just some instructional materials and training. The standard Spanish programs is an investment of a lot of money, and there is a difference. Well, the schools had to present a 4-year plan to their region and to the Division of Bilingual Education, and they had to meet certain criteria, and this is the criteria. Strong evidence of administrative and faculty support. Strong evidence of community support. Selection of language other than English based on the resources and interests of the community they're inserted in. Evidence of teachers' willingness and commitment to participate in the program on a voluntary basis. Plan for implementation and expansion as part of a K-12 continuum and school feeder pattern commitment to the continuation of the program. And one more important thing, it offered different instructional models. Schools could choose first a language that they wanted to do, French, Spanish, Creole, German, whatever, right? If they had the linguistically qualified teachers to do it in their staff, right? Then, Model A was 300 minutes of Spanish language arts or French language arts, whatever it was, 1 hour daily. You could also choose to do Model B, which was an hour and a half of instruction in the target language. It was 300 minutes of language arts and a content area, social studies or science, up to half an hour. Or you could use Model C, which is the BISO model, which was foreign language, Spanish language arts, and 2 content areas, so you could increase the amount of instructional time in the target language to 2 hours. This is important because the amount that the student of instructional time in the target language, the amount the student is exposed to the second language, directly impacts the proficiency and the speed of acquisition of the language of the student. A program that offers half an hour, like the Spanish has, and a program that offers an hour, and a program that offers 2 hours are not the same. They may all be good for what they were intended, but for acquisition of language, obviously, a longer time of instruction in the language is better than.
Is that the difference, Ms. Miranda, the time that's being provided?
These were models that were provided in the original plan. And a very important point, allocations for bilingual programs as established in the school allocation plan, K-12 school handbook, would not be negatively impacted as a result of using classroom teachers to deliver instruction in the selected language. Otherwise, if your school chose to offer an extended foreign language program, you would not lose your Spanish S teacher or your Spanish SL teacher or any of your bilingual teachers which are allocated by the district. This was important because otherwise Spanish teacher would say, oh, we don't want that problem because we're going to lose our jobs, right? But on the contrary, this was like a reward for schools that offer extended foreign language they could keep. It would not impact negatively on the bilingual educations that they received. And I think those are the major intent of the original.
Very briefly, what's the difference now, the way it's being implemented? We need to keep to our time, though. We're never going to be able to get to everybody.
There's quite a lot of difference.
A lot of difference. What is the biggest difference?
I think we need to pay attention to this. That was the second question. That was not within the first 5 minutes. Okay, I'll be fast. The original EFL is a good plan. I want to say that first. It's just that it needs to be implemented the right way and for the purpose it was intended. All plans have its gifts and its limitations, so you need to account for that. The original EFL plan provided a choice of instructional model. It had 3 models, right? The current plan eliminates those options and allows only a Model A, 300 minutes of language arts in the target language. In other words, 1 hour daily. You cannot offer more than that. So the school no longer has a choice in that. The original EFL plan envisioned secondary school implementation. The current plan is only K-5. The original EFL was an all-inclusive program. The plan's criteria for participation was that the program was open to all students who were interested, ELL, ESE, gifted. No GPA requirements. We have always believed that bilingual education is for all students, and acquiring a second language does not preclude a particular academic standing. This seems to have changed in the district's proposal for next year. On the contrary, we're eliminating opportunities for those students that most need it. The entry point for participating in the EFL until this year was kindergarten and first grade. I understand that next year it will be only kindergarten. So the question is, what options are available for students in kindergarten through second grade that are not accepted or are participating in an EFL program? They have no Spanish S, they have no Spanish SL. So they are left with no options for world language education. In the plan being suggested for next year, only students that have mastered grade level content can participate. Why are we condemning some students to a second-class education, eliminating opportunities to acquire a second language so necessary in the international marketplace of Miami and today's world? As Fabiola Santiago said in her article, you even need Spanish when you are, manejando una grúa.
Thank you, Ms. Miranda. Now that you mentioned Spanish S and Spanish SL, I'm going to move on.
Let me just mention one more thing, Vivian. It's just that I had 5 minutes, and I think these differences are important if we are to understand the dialogue that needs to happen in terms of the extended foreign language. In the inception, the EFL was designed to supplement and not to supplant the traditional language programs. In the original plan called for voluntary participation. The current plan's almost mandated. Originally, the professional development for new teachers was 8 to 5 days, etc. Now it's down to 2 + 1. The plan was envisioned, I'll cut it down. In some schools, if the Spanish special teachers had time in their schedule, they were asked to support the EFL instruction in Spanish or other language, especially if the school lacked bilingual teachers and/or to teach the upper grades. They were also used as mentors for the classroom teachers. The new plan prohibits the use of bilingual teachers for these purposes. So those are the main differences. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I know these are all very, very important matters, but in order to discuss all the issues, let's try to keep within the time. Ms. Toral, in less than 5 minutes, how does the Spanish S and Spanish SL programs compare to the extended foreign language program? And there is a question for you to address those issues coming up. You do have, there is a question to address those issues coming up for you. Yes, Ms. Toral, for you specifically, the difference between Spanish S and Spanish SL compared to the extended foreign language programs. And let's keep it brief so we can move on to Ms. Regalado's question.
I project well.
Okay. No.
The Spanish S was the program that was established in the 1960s. It's basically for students who have the proficiency in the language. It does not necessarily only for kids to have a Hispanic last name. You can have a Smith taking Spanish S, because it means that that child was exposed to the language at home, therefore has some level of proficiency when they get to school. There is an assessment process by which we determine that. The Spanish SL is for all those students, the majority of the students, who are in home where Spanish is not spoken.
And how do they both compare to the extended foreign language program?
Well, the extended foreign language program sort of, in some ways, combines both. You could have in the classroom kids from Spanish background and kids from non-Spanish background. So the Spanish S and SL were pull-out programs, basically, where kids were pulled out from the classroom to have instructions for 30 minutes a day or for 150 minutes a day. That's very minimum. If we think that our kids take English language arts for 13 years in school before they get a high school diploma, and some of them have a tough time writing a business letter in English, and yet we expect bilingual programs to be successful and produced by literate students with half an hour in the elementary grade, half an hour daily. With little or no language instruction in the middle school. And at the senior high, only probably the 2 years that they're required if they want to go to college. Because in the state of Florida, folks, unless it's changed in the last 10 years, foreign languages are not required in order to get a high school diploma. Right. If the students plan to go to college, then they take the 2 years, because most of the better universities, the Ivy League universities, require it. What the extended foreign language tries to do is try to extend the amount of time the students spend in learning the Spanish or the Haitian Creole or the French, and not just study the language arts of that language, but also use the language as a tool to learn other subjects. Not just to learn the language, but to apply the language is the only way they can learn. The extended foreign language programs in many schools, in most schools, combines Spanish S and Spanish SL kids, especially in the primary grades. The intent is that kids sometimes learn better from each other than they learn from the teacher. Okay? And I began my career as an ESO self-contained classroom teacher. And I had a classroom full of sometimes up to 40 kids who, all of them but one, spoke Spanish. And one day in the playground, I hear this little Haitian girl saying to the other kid, "Throw the ball, tírame la pelota, tírame la pelota." So I turn around and I say, "Who's saying that?" She had learned a lot. I didn't realize, I realized that day how much Spanish she had learned from her peers. So that's basically, one is a self-contained program that has more instructional time, not just in learning the extended foreign language, not just learning the language, but applying the language to study other subjects.
The next question maybe goes well with that anecdote that you just shared for Dr. Shirley Johnson. What do you feel is the impact of the change in policy from the traditional Spanish programs and world languages programs previously offered in our schools to the extended foreign language program for our African American students?
Well, first of all, I believe that every child regardless of race, creed, color, language, or any of those other things, have a right to a quality public education. Every child, no exceptions. I also believe that it shouldn't be any excuses for every child in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, including my children. There was no excuse why they shouldn't be bilingual. No excuse at all. And we confessed tonight that we have been faking it until we were trying to make it. That we had a false impression of what was happening and what really was not happening. And so when we talk about the African American child, I am not an expert in all African American children. I'm an expert in all children because I know children, and there is absolutely no exception. I sent my own grandson to a school so that he could learn both languages. And because of that, there's when you put people together, and as much as I don't know, there is no reason because I should know as well. If I've been in this community this long, just like you, all of us should be proficient in both language, and we should be very happy about it because we have a quality, and when I say a quality, public education for all children, for all people. We are all speaking the same language. We are also understanding it, and there is no fighting, there's no pulling, because we are all on one accord. That is my interpretation of wherever I go, because I can't just talk about my own community, because my own community look like you all. I'm not even sure if my next door neighbor is not here, and the one that lives behind me. And to separate, we don't need to separate that. All we need to do is to come together to make sure that the things that are not happening are happening. Now, when you say the difference, there is a difference. And I had an opportunity to read all of the questions about what is going to happen, what is the extended foreign language initiative, how is it different? Well, there are a lot of things in here, and Rosie said it earlier, that are not going to happen because there's ifs, where if there's an if, I have a problem with that. Because there should be something we know for sure that every one of the students in that program is going to get everything in the program. Not if there's a certain number, or if we have room. Well, I think all children should be able to come. So don't talk about if we have room, we will have room. And so there are a lot of the things in here that talks about this. What grades are the entry points for the EFL program? Kindergarten and grade 1. And then they talk about the fact that, well, suppose other kids want to come, and it's only if there's space. Well, there ought to be space, because if all of us are on the same and we are looking for all children to educate, then we already know we have enough room, and that takes money. And somebody talked about it earlier. It does take money in order to make sure that we have a quality education for all of our children. And we need to go where somebody else talked about earlier. You talked about making sure Tallahassee and our taxes are being paid, and we're doing what we need for our children. It is a shame when we can't, and it's time for all of us to stand together and come together and say, we want the very best for my children, your children, and the children to come. I have one last comment, and this is it. I do what I do because whether we miseducate or whether we educate our children, they are going to take over this country, one way or the other. So if I were you and we are working together, I would want them educated, all of them, so that when I go to the doctor, I don't want anybody trying to find my vein. I want them to be able to already see it and ready for me. Thank you.
Well, that last thought goes very well with my next question for Teresita Gonzalez Angulo. As an employment counselor, what are the needs of Miami-Dade County's business sector as it pertains to language skills requirements? What consequences would less access to world language instruction at an early age have for Miami's international marketplace?
Well, first of all, if you have a business, you want them to have good business. Nowadays, we need people to be able to work in any capacity, and like someone said before, even if you're going to clean the floors or drive a truck, you need to be bilingual. Otherwise, it's not only because you have to be able to communicate here or there, it's also because sometimes your supervisor, believe it or not, I had a case like that, they do not speak English. So the fact that I had people who speak Spanish made me the possibility for them to be hired simply because the supervisor only speaks Spanish. So those things are happening in our community nowadays. It is something that is not, we're not used to that. We come from other times, and we never expected that to be the case. But nowadays, for every business, you need to have bilingual personnel or employees because they need to communicate at every level with everyone, and you have a better business. And not having access to an early education, we all know, because we went through that having at early time the ability to learn both the culture and the language will make a big difference at the end, and consequently, you will be available for all sectors, and you will be needed and useful for the business owner.
Thank you very much. Now we'll have a series of questions open to all panelists. Once the question has been asked, any panelist who wishes to participate can answer the question and will have no more than 1 minute to respond in order to give an opportunity to all the other panelists. The first question is, we all know that early years are essential to language acquisition. Students must start early, apply the language, and have continuity of instruction of language learned. Having said that, what do you propose must be done to ensure that all students have equity and access to a pathway for a truly bilingual education in grades K through 12?
I'm in. All right, finally. I'm dying to talk. Okay, a few things. I really admire a lot of the things that were said here, and I'll start by saying that one of the biggest criticisms that people have about me is that I'm critical, okay? So understand that. But I don't think that I'm critical. I just think I'm honest. And I think that's the problem that our community has. We're not honest about what's really happening. And if that means calling a spade, a pampaña vino vino, okay? I don't mince any words. I come from a family that does not mince words, and I do not mince words. And I will give you one example about how Tallahassee has done damage to this. The report that we were talking about was written at a time and approved by a school board that had more constitutional power than the school board that I sit in today. The school board that I sit in today, beginning with Jeb Bush's administration as governor, stripped us of our rights as constitutional officers. Our funding is tied to testing. Our funding is tied to a ranking that we have no control over. And we go to Tallahassee every year and beg for leftovers. So we start there. 3 years ago, I got into a huge fight with our Dade delegation because our Dade delegation proposed a bill. And look, I'm an intellectual property attorney. I love tech. Everybody knows that. They proposed a bill for online learning. Every high school student had to take an online learning class. It was the business of education. I went to Tallahassee and spoke against that bill and went on every single radio station and spoke against that bill and said that it was going to do damage to our bilingual education because Spanish was one of the online options. They said that this was important because children were not going to take Spanish. Spanish was just part of the curriculum. Children were going to take a regular Spanish class. This was for children who didn't have access to Algebra 2 and trigonometry and classes that were offered in other areas. And North Florida didn't have access to calculus, and we needed to provide them online access to calculus. My response to that was, children will take the lowest common denominator, and children will take Spanish online. Watch. A year later, and listen, bilingual Miami-Dade County delegation members brought it, sold it, and packaged it in Tallahassee. A year later, our #1 online class, okay, I was wrong, Spanish was #2, but the #1 was actually driver's ed, online driver's ed. You pay tax dollars to show children how to play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego on a computer. That was actually a class. The second one was Spanish for Spanish speakers. The third one was Spanish for non-Spanish speakers, okay? So I mention that because that's just one example. When we talk about the instruction time and the time that is allotted, right now in middle school and high school, we have so much testing that we don't have the ability to give more time. I wish I could. Listen, one of my children, my kids are both in public school and I fight with it every time. One of the biggest concerns that we have from parents that put their children in bilingual immersion programs is that I have to be honest with them that their children will have 1 hour and 15 minutes more homework than children that are not in bilingual immersion programs. And that's the pushback. Is that my fault? It's the state's fault. I mean, we eliminated some tests this year. We will eliminate some more, hopefully. But the reality is that we live in a state that loves to test. We live in a state that puts emphasis, not just on a child's grade, not just on a school's grade, but now on a teacher's paycheck based on that child's performance, not in Spanish, but in English and in math and in science. We have a state that pushes for STEM. We have a state that has made other priorities. Bilingualism is not a priority.
So can anything be done then to ensure that all students have equity and access to a pathway for a truly bilingual education?
We have to row in the same direction. We have to row in the same direction. We have to make bilingualism a priority from the very top all the way down. And we have to face the difficult conversations of how it is necessary. How can we live in a state that talks about jobs, 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 and does not make bilingual education, if not mandatory, at least provide us for funding so that we can have bilingual education in our schools, and provide us for the time allocation so that you can have bilingual.
So it sounds like we have to go to Tallahassee with this in a major way.
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I've been saying it for years. But look, another thing. One thing that was mentioned is that it was cost neutral when it was first put on the table. And Tallahassee will say that it's cost neutral. This is not cost neutral. We do not have linguistically trained teachers that can do the bilingual instruction. We don't have them. They don't exist. I mean, they're wonderful people, but they're either deficient in one language or deficient in the other. We just don't have that caliber of teacher. And, in order for you to say, oh, this is cost neutral, you can have an English teacher teach Spanish and a Spanish teacher teach English, you need to have someone that is linguistically prepared to do that. And we don't have that. So I think that, the making it a priority, talking about the economic impact, being honest about how we are not bilingual and we are not biliterate is an important first step. But we're not doing that. And our delegation in Tallahassee are the first ones to sort of throw this under the bus. And that's just one example. I can talk about books. I can talk about, time allocation for testing. We can go on and on about how our autonomy has decreased to such an extent that we have little to no time, not just for Spanish, but for music, but for art, for a lot of other things that our community values, and that we simply cannot teach because we are saturated by requirements to meet a standard that is not only high, but that changes every single year.
Okay, now I need to give the opportunity to anybody else that wants to answer what should be done to ensure bilingual education in grades K through 12?
I think that what Ms. Regalado just pointed out is precisely the reason why it makes no sense to cancel Spanish SNSL and substitute it for extended foreign language, because extended foreign language can never be the universal option for world language education in the elementary schools. We don't have enough linguistically qualified teachers in every school in order to do this. And I understand what you're saying about the funding, but the funding was there before. So the question is, why was it cut, and what is that funding being used for? And
I can answer that, yeah. I can answer that.
wait,
I think Dr. Castro-Feinberg also wanted to speak on this.
I have a question to add to that, and I would like an answer. I told you that I searched board minutes back to the 70s. I did not find a board item that said, do away with Spanish S and Spanish SL. I did not find a board item that said, do away with those programs in grades K and 1. I found directives to expand biliteracy opportunities, but not directives to do away with those programs. Now, does that mean that the board is unaware that this is happening, or that you are aware that it's happening? If you are aware, what can be done about it? Here is the issue. Here is the problem. We had a program that served all the students. In 1996, Education Week reported that 95% of the children in elementary school were in either Spanish S or Spanish SL. That's just about everybody. Everybody was served by this program. We've lost it in kindergarten, we've lost it in first grade, we've lost it in second grade. And by the skin of our teeth, and thanks to the administration's review of its programs, we didn't lose the third grade this year, but they plan to take it away next year. How can you justify removing the program that serves everyone in the elementary school and instead focus all your energy on a program that serves only a few of the potential students? Now, I want to speak to the issue of rigor of the Spanish SL program for a moment. And this goes to institutional history. You've probably, many of you, forgotten that there was an evaluation of the Spanish SL program back in the 80s. And that evaluation found the following. Students who completed the Spanish SL sequence through the elementary grades were at a par with or exceeded the performance of the middle school students who completed first-year Spanish. Let me say that again. On the one hand, you have the students who completed first-year Spanish at the middle school. On the other hand, you have the kids who came up through Spanish SL. The little kids, with 30 minutes a day, no more than that, exceeded the performance of the students who took first-year Spanish at the middle school. Now, that is not small potatoes. That is not nothing to sneeze at. That is not something that we should sacrifice easily. Now, this was an evaluation a long time ago. We ought to renew the evaluation process once we have restored the program. But what I'm saying is don't trivialize the accomplishments of Spanish SL, because they are not trivial. And when I see the plans as reported in El Diario y El Nuevo, I appreciate staff looking into this and updating and changing and improving. But please, well, no, please, not that. But please, do not do this in so much of a hurry that, number one, you don't make your task force opportunities and meetings transparent. Videotape them, put them on TV, put it on the web. We want to know what's going on. All of us want to know what's going on. Number two, do not, please do not plan in year one to implement in year two without a field test, without an extensive field test and an evaluation. I used to teach language arts and debate, among other things. I loved teaching debate. It was great fun. But I would never for a moment say, as much as I love debate, put all your money and all of your energy into debate and forget about language arts for everybody. Just do debate for the elite. This chart that you held up, the questions and answers for 2015-2016, say that children who are not at grade level can't get in, children who are in a special program can't get in, children who are not in kindergarten can't get in without passing a linguistic test. Who's going to be in there? 2 or 3 people. Save money. Don't sacrifice the program that serves everyone in order to serve a few.
Yeah, I'll tell you about the board rule. But let me first deal with the funding question, because I think it's important.
How about the board rule?
Yeah, well, funding first and then board rule. Funding came first. You know, you asked us about our funding and the decisions that we have to make in the Miami-Dade County School Board. I can tell you that when I was first elected to the Miami-Dade County School Board almost 5 years ago, the budget that came after, we had to make some of the most difficult decisions that I think Miami-Dade County Public Schools has had to make in easily a decade. The governor cut education by $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion. We faced budget cuts that not only eliminated Spanish and art and music, but fired 200 of our teachers and put us in violation of class size to pay millions of dollars at the end of the year because we had no class size compliance. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Common Core and race to the top and all that stuff, and we won't even get into that and how that sort of, but it does fit into a lot of the decisions that have been made. Our board decided to participate in Race to the Top, not because we ideologically agreed with it, but because Race to the Top was going to give us the money to keep our 200 teachers. And other districts like us decided the same thing. And that set into motion a series of things that included merit pay, and issues that historically the school board of Miami-Dade County had fought. And we had to make those decisions because it was the only way to maintain our funding. When we talk about how much money we have for these programs, please understand that every year we go through an agonizing process as we decide, kind of a lo Sophie's choice, you know, which baby we like more. And we choose between art and music and science. And I'm not trivializing any of it. I'm just saying that you have to understand that our funding is set in a particular way by the state so that these are seen as extras. And that's why I keep saying that we have to make this a priority. When we talk about how many children are not allowed to participate in this program, the reason for that is because the district's #1 responsibility, as established by the Constitution and established by our funding from the state, and the agreement that we have, first with Race to the Top, and now with a series of other issues with the Department of Education, we have to focus on proficiency of students and ability to pass the exams. If a child cannot pass those exams, that's the reality. That's the reality. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's the reality. That is the reality. This is seen as a distraction by the state of Florida. Bilingual education is seen as a distraction. I don't know how more clearly to put it, but that's what it is. Now, as to where in the board rule does this happen? If you look at our rollout for the year, when we make decisions on what programs to roll out, you will see the breakdown. That's why it's no longer in a board rule. It's actually in a meeting. We have a full day-long meeting. Now it's like in July, you know, it used to be in August and we moved it up to July to give parents enough time for the rollout. We sit in July and talk about curriculum for all of our schools, the magnet programs, what's working, what's not working, what are we adding, what are we not adding, and we respond to parent demand based on application. I started talking about how parents are not interested in bilingual immersion programs. We have, the majority of our parents are interested in magnet programs that are STEM-based. And so the district rolls out more of those programs, and those programs eat away at the time.
Ms. Herrera, I want to talk now about I want to get a little bit of time to talk about the task force. So we need to.
The task force, listen, I totally agree with you. This should be a transparent process. This should be something that people talk about. You know, I'm the first one that thinks that we should have town hall meetings and talk about this. However, the only thing that I ask is that you not view this in a silo. Because I think we'll all agree that bilingual education is wonderful. I'm its, you know, first advocate. But how do you squeeze it in when you look at all of our other requirements?
The task force, though, I did have a specific question. EFL program was endorsed by an advisory committee or task force. And this is for all the panelists. Were any of you, given all your experience, invited or involved in the composition of the committee? And do you know how members were selected? Do you know if task force recommendations were advertised? Do we know if the decision to phase out Spanish was budgetary decision or a curriculum decision? What right do parents have? Does anyone want to speak to the process?
I think that's a question that needs to go to district staff and the board. It is my understanding that it was a budgetary advisory committee. Therefore, it is a budgetary decision, not a curriculum decision. But that's my opinion. So I would encourage people to ask district staff and the board.
I share your opinion, Tony, and I want to add a 30-second endorsement to what you're saying. I think it's a budget decision, too. Budget problems have been a constant in over the decades as we deal with issues of bilingual education, so that's not new. But what is new is dressing up a budget decision in the camouflage of curriculum enhancement. That is new and galling.
Was anyone in the panel at all invited to the task force? But let me ask that one more time. Was anyone, for example, Dr. Castro-Feinberg, given your historic involvement with bilingual education, Mercedes Toral, your experience, were any of you at all involved, Tony Miranda, that nobody was involved in the task force? Nobody was invited?
Not invited. Don't know anything about it.
Me neither.
I'm a school board member. I mean, they're not going to invite me.
You had a representative. You had to have a representative.
No, I wasn't. Actually.
We have the last question.
One more part to the budget thing. I can envision, and I sympathize with what you're saying about money. I can envision the budget people being asked, find a program that's not mandated by the state, where we can take that money and use it for something else because we're desperate. Now, during the worst of the depth of the darkest of the blackest of the worst of the dark days of budget cuts, the superintendent came out with 4 principles, and one of them was save bilingual and world languages, protect them. And we appreciate that. And we appreciate that every single member of the board supports bilingual education. But when the budget people say, here's this pot of money, and here's this amount, this is what it costs, the budget people have done what they're supposed to. They count cost. But it is board members that assign value. And the value is reflected in the budget. And when things are working well, the values of the community are reflected in the values of the institution and its budget. So, yes, it's a budget issue. I think it's been camouflaged. I don't like that. I would much rather have a discussion about the money. We don't have this much. How do we get it? Let's all work on Tallahassee. But first, we need to be, as you said, honest about what's going on. And second, we need to recognize that in the last analysis, it is the board that makes policy and sets the budget that reflects the values of its community.
Now, for the last question, I ask that you make me all feel a little bit better, that sometimes I'm listened to a little bit, because I'm a terrible teacher. Nobody would listen to me in class. I'm so glad I'm a reporter. So I'm going to ask you I want everyone to speak to this just really, really briefly, less than a minute for this last question, just to make me feel better. There is no continuity to bilingual education, especially through EFL, in our secondary schools. How do you propose that the district educate parents and students on the future needs students will have after high school in order for them to be able to compete in this global economy? So we'll start with, let's start on the other end, and that way we give Teresita Gonzalez Angulo the first opportunity. And very briefly, I think really we've heard that some parents resist this, and that obviously it's looked at something that's not necessary. I think it's very important to educate parents and perhaps also our legislators on this.
Definitely. I think that a lot had to do with the careless interest, whatever you want to call it, of parents in their children's education. I think that we should emphasize that somehow, publicity, some type of involvement, teachers, parents, communication somehow. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm sure that there has to be a way where those parents that are not involved in their children's activities and education has to come to work together with the teachers. And of course, that's not the bottom. I mean, that's only the bottom. But at the end, if you take their involvement and some other, I mean, we have to have, this is a political situation. I'm sorry, but that's a fact. Trying to be nice about it, I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I think we should demand more from our people, that we went there and voted for them, and they need to get involved, and they need to really push the administration to do their job. I don't want to see the people from the school administration presenting today about mental health. I'm sorry, but I don't think that mental health has nothing to do with children education, with the problems they're having. And I think the time should be dedicated more to their business than to be politically correct. I think that definitely politicians have to be involved, and we have to push, and we have to claim what we have the right for.
I totally agree when you talk about making sure that our political officials, those people that we represent, that we should let them know during election time, when they are out trying to get your vote, you need to ask them then and tell them right then, what are you going to do about my children, and what are you going to do about the bilingual education and what they don't know. You have to have people accountable, and it's not about name recognition, because sometimes we have the same people being elected over and over and over, and also doing the same thing. If they're doing a good thing, fine. But if they are not, then we need to get rid of them and put somebody else in.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I do know that the programs in middle school and high school have been reduced, including foreign language, and some of it, as Ms. Regalado has said, the virtual school is at fault for that. But it's also a principal's decision, it's also a board's decision, it's also a parent and student decision, and that can be instructed. We need to create an educational campaign. We need to speak to students about the importance professionally of multilingual skills. It's not just, something else. It is essential. How many of you remember James Edwards Olmos from Miami Vice? Remember? He used to say that having no multilingual skills in a globalized world that we live in is the same thing as writing in a typewriter in a world of computers. And that is the truth, and we need to carry that message to students, to principals, to high school counselors that sometimes say, oh, but you already speak Spanish, you only need 2 classes, right? We need to inform, we need to educate, and then we need to have the willpower to make it happen.
In the state of Florida, Rosetta Stone can be used to teach foreign language. It is actually the vehicle of choice for charter schools all over Florida. It is not the vehicle of choice for charter schools, yeah. It is not the vehicle of choice for many public schools, but it is approved by the state, and they receive the same amount of funding as a teacher in a classroom. So you can imagine how much more sense it makes to provide students with Rosetta Stones. That's the type of economics that I'm talking about. Those are the challenges that we face when we go up against this every year, and we talk about our budget.
Has this been brought up in Tallahassee as a separate issue?
These are bills that are presented. This one was presented by our Dade delegation too.
No, what I mean is for the need for bilingual education, has that been brought up in Tallahassee as a specific individual issue?
No. It's part of our platform. It's always been part of our platform, but it's not something that has been made a priority by the state of Florida in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they just don't think that it's important. I mean, and look, I've mentioned it. I've talked to our legislators about it. I mean, everybody knows how we feel, but understand, Miami-Dade County is like the redheaded stepchild, you know, in Tallahassee. So that's just the Miami-Dade County thing is what we get. But I can tell you that there has been an interest in other areas. You know, for all of our complaints here, I spent a lot of time visiting Tampa. Tampa only has 1 bilingual school, 1, and it's mainly comprised of English learners. Their school board has refused to make bilingual education a priority and to fund it. And a lot of residents in Tampa, many of which are now English learners, complain that their children do not have access to even rudimentary Spanish education. The same is true in Jacksonville. The same is true in Polk. You go county through county as the demographics of Florida change, and you have people who point to Miami-Dade County as the best possible bilingual education in the state of Florida. So understand that when we talk about the state and what is happening statewide, we are eons ahead of where other people are. Now, do I think that we need to make changes? Yes. Do I think that we've made mistakes? Yes. Do I think that we need to have a broader community that engages more stakeholders? Yes. Do I think that we should be having this conversation with the people who would not show up at this forum? Yes. And that goes to your point as to who you elect and what they value. You know, and how supportive are they of what we consider, you know, our values in Miami-Dade County. But understand, please, that it doesn't exist in a silo, that there's a lot of issues that push against this one issue. And that if you want to get parents engaged, and that was the question, if you want to get parents engaged, you have to be honest with them about the cost of this. There's a homework cost, there's a time cost, there is a cost to this. And I think that is something that we can educate parents on. But we have a difficult time educating parents on the importance of reading English, reading to your children English. So it's not going to be easy. You know, the district always talks about, you know, how to engage parents, and the parents are not going to get engaged. I will tell you that what I have found is the easiest way is just be honest and decide that there's going to be a certain % of the population whose parents are never going to engage, and work through other organizations and provide those children with mentors, and have those mentors be bilingual, and have those mentors talk about the importance of bilingual education, and talk about the economics, right? Talk about the economics of it. One of the things that the district, and this is the last point, one of the things that the district has been able to do in the last few years when we talk about dropout rates, is to explain to students at middle school and high school, this is your earning capacity if you drop out. This is your earning capacity if you graduate from high school. This is your earning capacity if you go to a 2-year college. This is your earning capacity if you go to a 4-year college. Granted, that conversation has now become a little trite with millennials who have a 4-year degree and are working at Starbucks. But that said, if you have a conversation with children early on about the earning capacity of bilingual adults, I think you will get a lot further than having a conversation about the retention of culture. That was the conversation that I had with my parents. Sad, but true. But I think that that is the future of this conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Toral.
I think, first of all, we have to make language learning a priority in this community, and it hasn't been a second language learning. It has not been a priority for this school district and this community for quite a while. Sad to say, but it's true. Second, we have to stop blaming our customers. It is our job to educate this community as to the professional importance for our students to learn a second language. Even more important for the kids who are not going to go to college. Because having proficiency in a second language is in itself a career, and it will make it a lot easier to get a job. And we need to do a campaign in this community, and we need to involve the business community, we need to involve the parents, we need to involve the students, we need to involve churches, we need to involve all sorts of organizations and make this an important issue. It is not an important issue. It hasn't been given a priority in the last few years. So it is not by accident that the things that are happening are happening. So if we want to improve the program, if we want to improve the quality of our graduates, we have to make this a priority. Media campaign, importance, resources. The programs are only as good as the financial and administrative support that they're given. If they are deemed to be not important to the administration, the schools are not going to give us support. It's just as simple as that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm certainly going to agree with the fact that we need different leadership at some of our positions. Certainly, you can't blame me for not trying. Ran all over the state for Lieutenant Governor, trying to ensure that we put an emphasis on education and that our budget is our values. You show me your budget and I'll show you our values. And that's been part of our biggest problem, because somehow, in Tallahassee, we have found money to fund buildings for for-profit charter schools. But somehow, we don't have the budget for us to have bilingual education. That's a problem. And I already talked about the importance of involving the business community. But all of you have neighbors. All of you have friends. We need to talk about this with everyone. We need to make this, you're right, a campaign. We did it before with the business community. We did it when I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce and the Beacon Council. We all came together and made sure that this was a priority. We can do it again. And the only way that politicians are going to listen is not just for us to run and lose by 1%, but it's for us to really make sure that we go to the media. I mean, Raquel and I do a lot of this, talking to people on Spanish radio, on, just the TV stations. It's really important to educate people about what's happening, because honestly, some people just have no clue all the things that are happening in Tallahassee. Some of them don't even know that they went home without a budget, right? So it's our job, if we really want to make a difference, and my suggestion is that we all talk about it. And for people like you who have the opportunity to have an audience through the TV, is to help us spread the word about the importance of us investing in our kids. Because we are at this point being penny wise and pound foolish, because every one of those kids, including my daughter, who by the way only gets 2 times a week Spanish for Spanish speakers, and I had to explain to her at a very early age why she didn't win the lottery, and she thought the lottery was just for money. And I had to explain to her that she didn't get into one of those bilingual magnet schools. That's a tough discussion to have with a very young child. So she now goes to a regular public school where she gets Spanish twice a week. And I think she's in 3rd grade.
She's supposed to get it every day.
She gets it twice a week. Not every school gets it.
Well, for more time.
And so these kids are going to be our leaders and are going to run our community and our country. We better invest in their education, and that needs to be our priority with the budget, both everywhere, at the national level and at the local level and at the state level. And we can make a difference with that. Thank you.
I hope our board members, and Raquel, you may be the only board member left in the room right now.
No, Marta's here.
Marta
left, let's go.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Feldman had to leave too. They're all supportive of bilingual education. But Raquel, if you would take the message back, please, that we want the board members to let staff know that it's okay to unleash their creativity and think of ways to serve all elementary school students. Spanish S, Spanish SL, I don't care about the name of the program. I care that it be a daily program, at least 30 minutes or more, with qualified staff, and that will be increasingly a priority. I'm not asking you to say you're going to put the dollars in there. I'm asking you to say that you're going to ask staff to think about ways to solve the problems. That's number one. Number two, tomorrow's the board meeting, and at some point, I think at 11, they're going to be discussing these issues. It won't be televised because it's at 11. A board meeting is open to the public. Wouldn't it be wonderful if some of you were there? Wouldn't it be wonderful if all of you were there to see what the board is doing and to show them by your presence that you care? This is a wonderful year for doing that because 5, maybe 6 board members will be up for election. Now, I don't mean we want to replace our board members. We have a good board. We want to talk to them, and they hear better during election time. So this is a wonderful time to find opportunities to talk to our board members and to talk to them about these very issues. Last item. I'd like Dr. Vivian Bosquet to stand, please. Former president of the Florida Foreign Language Association and the bearer of gifts, 2 letters, one from the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages and the other from the Joint National, JNCL, Joint National Planning Council. The Council for Languages, thank you. National Education Associations dealing with foreign language education, both of whom sent letters supporting this forum and the purposes of this forum, and in more or less direct answer to your question, there's a public awareness campaign that will be launched in 2016 under the auspices of these organizations. Will you keep us informed?
Yes, lead with languages.
Yes.
American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages.
And that would be something we can all piggyback on, both at the national level, at the state level, and really at the local level too. So the cavalry is coming. In the meantime, we depend on our faithful board member. Thank you board members who were here. Thank you district staff members who were here. And thank all of you who are here, because without you, it's no forum.
I would like to thank all the distinguished, I'd like to ask you. Just really quick, because I want to make sure everybody gets the time right. De Armas, it's not at 11, because we have our resolutions at 11. What time?
That's when they begin for S. That's the first set at 5.
At 5? So we're going to, no. So we're going to talk about it at 1. We're not going to talk about it at 11.
Well, we have at 11 some that are being discussed. I think it's H5, and then the others in the rest.
So 1 is a resolution. So we're.
It's Dr. Feldman's resolution for H5.
Yeah, but that's a bilingual. That's like read conmigo. Okay, let me aplicar esto.
Tell us what the board item.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, so it's bilingual month. And so last year, I brought an item recognizing Read Conmigo, which is a program that provides free literature. And Dr. Feldman has a similar item this year. So I guess that's what they're saying, that there's going to be a recognition. But that's like when we give someone like a proclamation and we all take a picture. Our actual meeting starts at 1 o'clock, where we're going to be dealing with regular business. I don't know, I would assume that this may be discussed in the A items, which happen at 5. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the superintendent. I don't do the A items. But since the presentation was made to us during our committee, that's usually what happens. The presentations that are made to us at committee are then made at 5 o'clock, which is drive time. And then after those presentations are made by the superintendent to the board, then we have like open mic night at the school board, which is like public hearing. So I don't want people sitting there all day. That's why I'm saying 11 o'clock is like a ceremonial thing. Please don't come at 11. You'll hate us by the time we get to 5 o'clock. The way that the school board works is you sign up to speak. We allow everyone to speak. So, I would recommend public hearing. That would be like my recommend, because if not, you're just going to be sitting there for a very long time. Sometimes if we do our business faster, public hearing will start at 4:30. So I would make the recommendation to be there at 4:30 if you want to speak about this before the board. We cannot start public hearing before 4:30. So even if we finished all our business at 2 o'clock, we literally have to sit there until 4:30, and at 4:30 we open up the mic. Everybody has 3 minutes to speak. If you didn't sign up, you can ask us for the right to speak. We'll vote and we'll allow you to speak. You can say bilingual education when you sign up. You don't have to attach it to a board item. But just to give everybody sort of the FYI, how the process and how it works. And then since it's at 5 o'clock, you'll actually be able to listen to it. You'll be able to listen to the public discussion on NPR, and also you'll be able to see it on TV. The 11 to 1 o'clock is not live because they're resolutions, and what they do is we record them, and then it airs after the school board meeting. So we're already gone by the time that airs. But at 1, the regular meeting will come on, and you can watch it, so you can talk about, we'll go through all our board items until we get to 4:30 or 5. So logistically, that's what I wanted to explain. I don't want people sitting there all day. They get very angry with us.
Tell us about the open mic and how we can sign up for it. Mary will be providing that information. We have to leave the premises by 9 on the dot, so we need to go ahead and finish the program.
You just go to the clerk and you sign up for public hearing.
Very fast. Let me tell you, I think to start communication and to start informing the public about what's going on, budget and otherwise, what the board is doing, which was one of the main complaints, I'm inviting you and the administrative portion that is here, Ms. De Armas, I think, is here. I think we would like for you to go at least once a month on a Friday at 10 p.m. to the radio program and provide all this information so people can be aware. I know that you do it all the time. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. And you can do that in your program too. But I think it's very important that the administrative part, and they have been there before, continue doing this on a monthly basis so we know what's going on as public, as parents.
Since we are a little bit over, I just want to thank all the members of, what a distinguished panel. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge and your experience, which is absolutely invaluable. Thank you to Ana Cuervo and LULAC, Florida, for bringing this very critical issue up with this forum, and I'm going to call Mari up to the podium.
I would like to thank everyone for your participation and activism. Excuse me, but it's not over. Hello?
If we could please sit down. Can we please give one more minute of courtesy to Ana Cuervo and LULAC, who hosted this forum? Thank you.
We're not over. We still have some people that we want to recognize, so please, if you could just give me a couple of minutes, and we'll go ahead and finish it. I think it's very important that we acknowledge our sponsors, so please just give me a second just to do that. I would like to thank everyone for your participation and activism. It is through active participation, advocacy, and civil participation that we advance our common goals. And we noticed our conversation today, right? It was a very active conversation. We have difference of opinions. However, we all have a common goal. We all know that being biliterate and being bilingual is very important to this community. So I think that we cannot let go of that. We need to find common ground and find a way to make it happen, because it can be happen. This is the United States of America, and the power lies on the people. We cannot continue hearing that there's no money and that we have budgetary constraints. We have the power to elect who will make that happen, and that is where we want to go with that. So I hope this is the first in this community where we have this conversation, that we continue having this conversation, because that's the most important thing. We need to get active. We know that it's hard to come from work. We all have jobs, and sometimes we have jobs that really don't allow us to speak, but we speak because we care, no matter what comes behind our speaking. So I hope that you understand that, because this is the United States of America, and we have freedom of speech, but most important, we have the civil right to do what's right by our children, our older people, and ourselves. So I hope this is the first in this conversation, that is not the last, and so that we can continue doing what is best for our community, because it is possible. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Okay? So I want to acknowledge our esteemed sponsors before we go. We want to say thank you to LULAC. We want to say thank you to NACAE, to the Hispanic educators of United Teachers of Dade that have been versing these issues for many, many years, and finally they have your ears. Also to Sant, to South Florida Council. We also want to say thank you to the NAACP, UTD, who is a great sponsor, also Salad, Sweet Water, and we have some councilmen here, which we have Mr. Jose Soto, and we also have, let's see, right here, Carolina Blanco, who that we did not introduce at the beginning, but we want to make sure. Also Manny, I'm not sure if he's here, Manny Hartman, and for those of you that don't know Manny, he represents the South Florida Labor Council for Latin Arnerican Advancement, that they just opened a charter here, right, not too long ago. So we want to make sure that we're also giving their involvement. The press, I cannot say thank you enough to El Nuevo Herald, because they have been writing about this for years, and it has gone unheard. What no longer is going to go unheard. We're going to do something about it, and I hope that we could do it together. And thank you, Ana, for picking up this forum. We really appreciate it. And everybody else, thank you.
Bye.